KL leads through chaos, forcing the team into perfect synchronization against Lysandra's illusions. But each correction feeds something deeper within the network. Darius watches closely. Not the battle, but the pattern forming. Subscribe to Turmoil Studio. Adaptation has a cost. The lattice did not fracture. It hesitated. A long, suspended silence stretched through the golden structure like reality itself was unsure how to proceed. Then, it began to recalculate identity. KL felt it first. The system isn't reacting to action anymore. Lyra turned slightly. Then, what is it reacting to? Thorn's eyes narrowed. Continuity drift. Nyx tilted her head. That's a fancy way of saying it doesn't know who she is. Lysandra stood still, but something beside her did not. A second presence aligned perfectly at first, shifted half a step out of sync. Not distorted, not broken, just no longer dependent. It separated, Riven muttered. Lysandra didn't respond immediately. Her gaze stayed forward, but the reflection beside her turned its head first. No, she said quietly. A pause. It didn't separate. The lattice pulsed, harder than before. It stepped out, Lysandra added. Silence hit the team. Not confusion. Recognition of something new. Above them, Orlitha shifted slightly for the first time. Her wings dimmed, then stabilized in a new pattern. Not harmony, not conflict. Observation. Oh, you are witnessing identity divergence. Her voice echoed, a state where self is no longer singular. Thorn's voice dropped, so the system stopped enforcing uniqueness. It stopped assuming it, Auralitha corrected. The reflection beside Lysandra moved again. This time, without hesitation, it stepped forward into empty lattice space and remained stable. Lyra took a slow breath. That shouldn't be possible. Nyx smirked faintly. That's becoming the default sentence in this place. The lattice responded. Not with collapse, but with multiplication. A second Lysandra projection appeared. Then a third. Not clones, not errors. Just valid continuations of her existence under different conditions. Riven's grip tightened. How many of her are there? Kale didn't answer immediately, because the system didn't either. Then a new presence entered the lattice flow. Not through distortion, through calculation. Darius stepped forward, calm, observing. No reaction to the anomaly density around him. Only measurement. It's accelerating, he said quietly. Lyra turned toward him. Accelerating what? Darius didn't look at her immediately. His eyes stayed on Lysandra's branching states. Decision entropy. Covert. Thorn narrowed his gaze. You're treating identity like a system variable. Darius finally looked up. It is a system variable. A pause. You just stopped treating it like one. The lattice pulsed again. Sharper this time. Then a second presence emerged. Not observing, correcting. Seraphine arrived like a stabilizing frequency. The lattice around her tightened, instantly attempting to re-establish singular coherence. Her eyes locked onto Lysandra. This divergence is unstable. Lysandra tilted her head slightly. Is it? Seraphine stepped forward. You are fragmenting, or expanding, Lysandra replied. A pause. The system strained between definitions. Kyle stepped slightly forward. Seraphine, what are you trying to do? Seraphine didn't look away from Lysandra. Restore singular identity coherence. Nyx exhaled softly. She's trying to compress the system back to one state. Darius spoke without emotion. That will fail. Seraphine's gaze shifted slightly. Explain. Darius. Darius pointed subtly toward the lattice branching. The system already accepted multiplicity. A pause. Reversal creates structural resistance. Thorn's eyes narrowed. So forcing unity now creates instability. Correct, Darius said. Seraphine's expression tightened. Not anger, calculation strain. Lysandra's reflections moved again. One stepped closer to Seraphine. Another stayed near Kael. Another simply observed, Lyra whispered. They're not copying her anymore. They're exploring outcomes, Thorn finished. The lattice began to hum. Not chaotic, structured, like a system learning multiple truths simultaneously. Ray, Seraphine raised her hand slightly. Then I will contain it. The lattice responded instantly. Compression fields forming around the nearest projections. But Darius spoke calmly. You're reacting too late. Seraphine froze for half a second. That was enough. The projections shifted before containment locked. Not escaping, repositioning, as if they already knew the outcome. Nyx's smirk returned slightly. She's learning from the correction attempt. Kael's voice lowered. The system is predicting responses now. Darius corrected him. No, a pause. It's simulating identities reacting to responses. Silence. That distinction changed everything. Lysandra closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the reflections did not mirror her anymore. They aligned differently, independently. They're not me, she said quietly. A pause. But they came from me. The lattice pulsed. Acknowledgement. Seraphine stepped closer. Then you must choose which you are. Darius shook his head slightly. Wrong approach. Seraphine glanced at him. Then what is correct? Darius looked at Lysandra. You don't choose identity here. A pause. You observe which version survives interaction longer. Lyra frowned. That sounds wrong. It sounds efficient, Nyx muttered. Lysandra looked at her reflections. None collapsed, none dominated. They simply existed under different conditions. And for the first time, the lattice did not force resolution. It waited. Seraphine lowered her hand slightly. Then singular identity cannot be restored. Darius nodded. Not without collapse cost. A heavy silence. Kael stepped forward. So, what happens now? The lattice answered first. Not with voice, with expansion. Auralitha descended slightly, her gaze deeper than before. Identity is no longer a fixed state, she said. A pause. It is a negotiable field. The lattice spread outward again. Not breaking, not stabilizing, just evolving. Seraphine stood still. Darius remained observing. Lysandra stood between her own possibilities, and the team realized no one was outside the system anymore. Nyx exhaled. We're not inside a system. Thorn finished quietly. We are the system observing itself. Kael looked forward, calm, but changed. Then the question isn't who she is anymore. A pause. It's what the system allows her to become. Fire. The lattice pulsed one final time and expanded into uncertainty. Not chaos, not order, possibility. The word did not echo. It multiplied. Ka, ka, ka. In the lattice, it became structure. In thought, it became weight. In reality itself, it became selection pressure. Kael felt it first, not as sound, not as vision, but as branching existence pressing against his awareness. Something is expanding. Lyra's eyes trembled slightly. No, it's not expanding. A pause. It's splitting. Riven tightened his stance, instinctively. Splitting into what? Thorn didn't answer immediately, because he was already seeing it. Not one outcome, not two, but layers of outcomes stacking on top of each decision point. Not outcomes. He exhaled slowly. Versions. Nyx's expression sharpened. For once, no grin. So the system isn't choosing anymore. She stepped forward slightly. It's generating branches of us. Auralitha did not descend. She did not rise. She simply stayed in place, as if even she was observing a rule that had just changed mid-execution. Possibility has crossed threshold density. Her voice emerged. Identity is no longer fixed to continuity. The lattice reacted, not with collapse, not with resistance, but with awareness. And then, Cassandra changed. Not physically, not visually at first, but conceptually. Her reflection, still beside her, tilted its head slightly differently. A delay formed, then disappeared, then inverted. Cassandra blinked. It's not mirroring anymore. The reflection responded first. No, a second voice, identical, but not aligned. Lyra stepped back. That shouldn't be possible. Thorn's voice dropped. It's not mirroring. It's divergence continuity. Kale turned slightly. Explain. Thorn's eyes narrowed, tracking multiple shifting probability layers. The system is no longer copying identity states. It is iterating them. Riven frowned. Iterating what? Nyx answered quietly. Us. Us. A pause. Heavy. Unnatural. Then Cassandra spoke again. But not in one voice. Two. Almost synchronized, but not quite. I can feel it. The reflection added. I can feel more than one. Faith. Silence fractured instantly. Kale stepped forward. Define more than one. Cassandra hesitated. Her reflection did not. I remember actions I did not take. A pause. And I did take them, Lyra whispered. That doesn't make sense. The reflection turned slightly toward her. It does here. The lattice pulsed. Does. The lattice pulsed. Not violently, but intelligently, as if confirming a hypothesis. Orletha's wings shifted slightly, not in threat, in recalibration. You are witnessing identity decoherence, she said. Riven exhaled sharply. That sounds like failure. It is not failure, Orletha replied. A pause. It is expansion without constraint. Nyx muttered. That's just failure with better branding. The lattice responded, not to her words, but to her certainty. Nyx staggered slightly. Okay, it reacts to intense structure now. Kyle narrowed his eyes. It's learning from interpretation. Thorn nodded once, and, reinforcing it, Cassandra took a step forward. Or rather, both versions did, but not in sync. Thorn, the space around her fractured softly. Not breaking, not splitting, but layering. A second Cassandra appeared, then a third. Then none disappeared. They all remained. Lyra's voice dropped. That's replication of self-state. Riven tightened his grip. We need to stop this. Kale didn't move. No. A pause. We need to understand it first. The Cassandra variants looked at each other. Not confused, not hostile. Curious. One spoke. Which one is real? Another answered. That depends on observation. The third added. And selection. The lattice pulsed again. Harder. Deeper. Reality itself began to feel less like a surface and more like a decision tree. Orletha finally moved. One step forward, and the entire lattice stilled. Reality is not selecting identity, she said. Identity is selecting reality. Silence. Thorn froze. That's inversion logic, Nyx whispered. So we're not being shaped. A pause. We're shaping what becomes stable. Kale looked at Cassandra, at all versions of her. Then why are there multiple? End event. Orletha's gaze turned slightly downward, for the first time not at them, but at the system itself. 'Cause stability requires comparison. A pause. And comparison requires multiplicity. The lattice reacted instantly, expanding, but not outward, inward, into depth. Cassandra's variants began walking separate paths, but all remained connected, not by lines, not by energy, but by awareness overlap. Lyra whispered. They're diverging, but still aware of each other. Thorn nodded, parallel consciousness threading. Riven muttered, That's a nightmare. Nyx corrected softly.